Hello and welcome to Inflection Point Conversations. I'm Michelle Obader, an art director and 3D artist. In this podcast series, I'll be interviewing experts in the field of art, architecture, and visualization. Together, we'll take a deep dive into the disruptive topics that have reached an inflection point in our industry. If you're enjoying this podcast, please take a moment to like, rate, and subscribe. You can also comment and give feedback. I'd love to reach more people and grow this amazing community. Okay, today I'm talking with Alwyn Hunt. Alwyn works as the head of education partnerships within the 3D and immersive division at Adobe. He's also the co-founder of The Rookies, a community of non-professional digital artists. Alwyn began his career in the VFX industry, working as a character texture artist for over 20 years. He's worked at several studios around the world, including Sony, Imageworks, MPC, DNEG, Animal Logic, RSP, and Weta FX. His main film credits include Harry Potter, Watchmen, The Wolfman, Alice in Wonderland, John Carter, The Hobbit 1 and 2, Game of Thrones, Logan, Thor Ragnarok, and Tomb Raider. It's a great list. Alwyn has a passion for the industry and an interest in helping create pathways for emerging artists into leading studios globally. Welcome, Alwyn.
Hi, Michelle. Great to finally meet you. Thanks for
Yeah,
having us.
I'm so
That
glad
is,
to have you on. I have so many interesting things to ask you. That's a really impressive list of credits that you have there. You've been in the industry for a long time,
yeah, it
which
makes me
doesn't
sound
surprise
really
me.
old.
It's only a good thing. It's only impressive. Um, well, let's get started. I know you've worked on many well-known films. What got you interested in visual effects?
Yeah, I mean, actually, that list that you sort of rifled off then, that actually, but even before the VFX career, I actually had a previous career where I was actually a chef. When I left school, I was telling you just
Wow.
before we jumped online that, I grew up in sort of rural New Zealand where there wasn't a lot of opportunities. And actually, when I left home, I sort of got into hospitality and trained as a chef. And I actually had a whole nother career that was based in chefing, which took me to London, working in Michelin star restaurants and all that sort of
Oh,
stuff. So
wow.
I actually used food art portfolio to get me into art school because I always loved the creative process. So I'm going to sort of tell you the journey in a really
Absolutely.
condensed format. But yeah, getting into art school, loved the sort of traditional art. And then from that sort of sculpting, modeling, and then got into photography and then Photoshop. And that's kind of when digital art was kind of hitting the scenes. And then I remember seeing something on TV, and it was early days at ILM talking about visual effects and things like that. And I was like, what? It just blew my mind. And actually, so then there were some early courses that were coming out in Sydney that were focusing on 3D animation and visual effects. So yeah, I begged, borrowed, and stole money to be able to get on those courses, and essentially just changed my whole career. I used the cooking to sort of support myself on the weekends while I was, studying. But it really just came from seeing something on TV and having that creative passion, which was kind of, at that point was, sort of cutting edge technology, which has always fascinated me. And but to be honest, I didn't know the sort of the front to the back end of a computer when I first got into it. So that's kind of how I started. It was just seeing that and really just jumping on some of those early courses where I was learning 3D Studio Max and Dreamweaver and all sorts of programs where I was just way in over my head. And to be honest, I came out of that and I didn't even have a portfolio of work. I was just, the courses back then were being taught out of manuals that were about that thick. And, the instructors or lecturers were really just regurgitating information out of those manuals. And it wasn't really, a rich course, to be honest.
Yeah. So when you had your first job in the CGI industry, were you experienced only from those courses? Did you pretty much learn most of it on the job?
Yeah, so pretty much learned most of it on the job. And when we're talking about how students are finding work and struggling to find work nowadays, like back then, because I'd already been through a career, I kind of knew what the system or the game was in terms of being sort of a little bit mature and really just calling studios up and going, hey, do you have any work? I'd love to just come down and be able to sort of watch artists do some work. So I was doing a lot of sort of cold calling, getting networking, getting to know who people were in the industry, and at the same time just trying to have some material that I could actually present to them when I got there. And then there was one sort of small studio based in North Sydney that said, hey, you know what, they were close to where I was sort of living, and they were like, oh, you must have come down and check out the studio. And just because, they realized that I was a good person, that I wasn't really, trying to, that had no underlying motives apart from trying to get into the industry. I sat in on a few of the jobs and was just listening and learning and just kind of observing more than actually working on it. And then, the next job came around and they're like, hey, you've got some 3D experience. Would you be interested in trying this? And that first building block. And that was just through sheer persistence that kind of got me that opportunity. But from that first building block, then you get something, and then you're able to go to the next place and go, hey, I've done a little bit of work here. Can I, so that's how it sort of all started back then. Things are different now because you can't just go to a studio and knock on the door and say, hey, can I just, it's a little bit different. But we can talk about what sort of some methods for students are to be able to kind of create those opportunities are nowadays. But that's kind of how it started for me. And then from that, I got a job in next studio and then had enough work that I could then apply for a company in Sydney called Animal Logic. And that's kind of where I was working as a generalist. And back then they had a whole division that was focused on commercials. They had the feature animation stuff where they did Happy Feet and all that, but they also had a small division doing high-end commercials. So
and that's what you worked in?
Yeah, that's what I worked in. And as a 3D generalist, you're kind of like expected to know. And I was way in over my head, like again, learning on the job, just survival. You go home each night, just like, okay, what are the techniques? How do I do this? Trying to figure it all out, and then go to the next, go into the next day and hopefully have some skills that you can kind of, bring it all together. But you learn a lot very, very quickly, and in that sort of 3D generalist role. But through that role, I was able to figure out that actually my passion was the texturing component, obviously because of my formal training in fine arts and that sort of food, creative aspect, that I realized that actually the texturing was being able to create those surfaces and using Photoshop to create those texture maps was kind of the closest thing to to that more organic, painting and fine art sort of tradition.
Is that how you got into Adobe Substance Painter? Because you work for Adobe Substance, right?
Yeah, so that's another whole story within itself.
Oh, there's another. Tell
me. If you fast forward, so got into the industry, got started doing texture art and all the rest of it. So back in when. So there's a few softwares that are focused on texturing. So back in the day, early days, it was Photoshop. Everything had to be textured using Photoshop. And then Maxon had 3D body paint, which was kind of then painting on the model. And that was quite revolutionary at the time. And then Mari from, which is, Foundry, they came onto the scene, which was technology that came out of Weta effects. And I was one of the first, early adopters of Mari when I was working in London. So there's always been evolutions in the software. And then, sort of about 5 years ago when I was back here in Australia, that's when Substance 3D sort of started making feature developments in the visual effects industry. They sort of forged their teeth in games, and there was a noticeable shift in the quality of games when Substance was introduced to Naughty Dog and a few other studios. That the environments where people were like, wow, this is amazing. That was predominantly due to Substance and PBR and some of the workflows that were adopted by those companies. And then it moved into visual effects, and then I kind of recognized that it was a bit of another game changer, as was Mari back in the day, and that's when I sort of adopted Substance in that visual effects environment. So I was doing some work with Algorithmic, who were the original creators of Substance before it got acquired by Adobe. It was, I was out here sort of evangelizing them, and then they got acquired by Adobe. So then I sort of ended up as the sort of the substance 3D guy for ANZ. And then Adobe asked if I'd be interested in working for them to carry on this role. So then I was torn between sort of the rookie stuff, and then I was moving out of the industry at that point and going more full-time on the rookies because that was taking
Mm.
off. And so I was kind of at this crossroads of like, okay, cool, we've got the rookies and then this great opportunity with Adobe, which I sort of recognized as being good for both. So, Adobe have obviously, has opened a lot of doors for me. And it's also really helpful for the rookie stuff as well.
Yeah. Substance was fantastic I remember when it first came out, when it was algorithmic. I was working in an ArcViz studio. We were doing a VR experience, and so we were going into real time, and I have a background in video games, and so got very excited. And we had a department who was also VFX who got really into the Substance Painter, which felt like a bit of a luxury to sit and kind of polish the ends of the woods of the furniture and stuff like that. It was so nice. It was really like, it felt like you're really indulging to be able to put camera close. And I mean, the detail that you can get from that, especially with all the PBR material, it was pretty revolutionary. I mean, I'm sure it's come quite a long way since that. I haven't really used it for a while.
Yeah, I think, when I talk about Substance 3D Painter or any of the, it's the use of ease. When you look at some of the other programs, there's a huge learning curve with a lot of them, and there's not a lot of great material to be able to take you on that sort of learning journey. The great thing with Substance Painter, and I'm probably going to sound like I'm doing a sales pitch now, but Substance Painter is, if you've used Photoshop, it's what I call Photoshop for 3D. It's a very
Mhm.
similar interface, the layer stack. You're doing very similar workflow when you're using Substance Painter. And I think what that's done, or what that's allowed, is it's put the creativity back into the artist's hands where they're not worrying about the technical so much. They bring, that passion, like you just mentioned there, was a luxury to be able to actually add those
Mm.
beautiful details and not get caught up in the technical aspects. And that's been a revelation for a lot of artists, that they're actually back doing what they love. And,
Mm.
we're seeing that also in new industries now. So, not only in games and visual effects, substance is being used in a lot of different industries now.
Yeah. So tell me, you co-founded the Rookies. We just touched on that briefly, a platform for non-professional digital artists, and you host a competition every year that helps to highlight work of artists starting out in the industry. What made you want to start that?
Yeah, so myself and Andrew McDonald, who's the other co-founder, who's actually also based here in South Australia, when we were working in London, we were working at a company there called MPC. We were, reviewing a lot of students' demo reels and seeing talent coming out of, the sort of the local universities. And there was a lot of schools that were sort of touting themselves as being, number one in teaching visual effects and number one in teaching games and all the rest of it. But the reality was, they had quite a large marketing budget, and, the quality of the students that were coming out of some of these training facilities weren't meeting, the sort of the expectations of what industry were requiring. So we were approached by a university back then to kind of help bridge that gap. We also worked with an organization called Skill Set back in the day. And we recognized that there was a real the gap between these students coming out and what industry required. So we wanted to create this platform for two reasons. One, to help bridge that gap and introduce students into, concepts of working in the industry through running dailies, giving feedback on final projects while they're working at university, really just start introducing them to industry standards early on before they even got into industry. And the second part was to actually celebrate students that were doing really good work from from training organizations through in awards, right? So
Mhm.
back in the day, it was called CG Student Awards, and we still had, the CG Coach platform. So we went through a whole rebranding to what is known today as the Rookies. But back then, which was 14 years ago, we had CG Coach and CG Student Awards. So they really were two sort of separate entities. But CG Student Awards That was the one that really took off, and we started getting lots of entries from students all around the world, and then we realized we kind of had this thing, and it was great to then be able to celebrate students, because there was no other platform really doing that.
Yeah.
The CG coach component, we ended up getting pushback from universities because we were giving advice, industry advice, where it not necessarily was lining up with what lecturers and education were sort of teaching, because for various reasons, maybe the content was outdated at university, maybe lecturers had been in those positions for too long and weren't coming up to speed with modern sort of techniques and tips. So there was a bit of a conflict there. But CG Student Awards carried on to what is known as the Rookies platform today. So we still, the underlying reason why we created it back then are still relevant today. It's really about community, and I think even more so today, being connected is really paramount in creating opportunities and just supporting you on this journey. Like it's really sad. We CG Society, which has been around forever. There's been a few different platforms that have always been there for students and for industry professionals to be able to kind of come together and celebrate
I
their
remember
work.
it. Mm.
Yeah, so that's closing down. So there's fewer and fewer of these platforms that to really help bring people together. So we're quite passionate about supporting the community. And we do that through a number of different, ways on the actual platform itself. But really, yeah, that's kind of how it all started. So yeah, fast forward 14 years, and the Rookie Awards last year, we had over 5,500 entries that were part of the Rookie Awards. Every
Yeah.
single person that enters into that gets some sort of industry feedback through a ranking system that that they get a digital certificate at the end of it. So it's all about, giving back, supporting these students, because they can get really isolated, whether they're doing these courses at home or even in a classroom, and not understanding what that global landscape looks like in terms of who they're competing against. So you're able to sort of benchmark yourself against students that are at the same stage as you on a global stage, which is really super
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
And it's great that you have judges. You have quite a few judges from all different,
We
different
have you.
industries. We have me. I know. I've noticed the quality of work. Just from like 3 years ago to now, has gone up really high. And I'm wondering, have you noticed, I guess, the reason that you started it being that you wanted to raise, the quality, and sort of bridge that gap between, students graduating. Have you noticed universities and colleges actually teaching more, skills closer to, things that's going to be required from people starting out? Have you noticed that too, I guess, over 14 years?
Yeah, I think, when we look at the Rookie Awards every year, and Michelle, honestly, you've been a judge, and like you said, the quality is just mind-blowing with some of these
Mm.
students that are coming out. I think there are schools and institutes doing amazing jobs, and I think when you look at what that dynamics is, there is always close industry contacts or connections within that school and industry that are there's an open communication about what needs to be taught. There's networking things happening. So there's a real formula with education and industry to be successful, to have that student that is being output at a level that industry want, right? I think
Yeah.
and then at the other end of the spectrum, there are still a lot of universities out there that are struggling to keep up, and that's always been the case. There's always new features, software being
Yeah.
launched and releases, and even more so now with AI and how that's going to be taught. And it's traditionally they've been slow because it is such a large ship to kind of pivot and change curriculum. You're always bound to the year that you've already planned to hit. So to try and pivot or change quickly, they're not agile in that sort of sense.
Yeah.
So when you look at schools that are able to adapt very quickly and introduce curriculum that is relevant, they're the ones that are outputting amazing students. So yeah, I think it depends on the institute, depends on how large they are, the bureaucracy that they've got to go through to make change. Some of them are still very, still lagging behind, which
Yeah.
is a concern. And I think that's again, when you look at the rookies platform, we have our global school rankings, we have our school directory, we have a lot of resources on there where new people that are trying to find or discover where these great schools are. That's a really great resource because obviously we're unbiased. Schools cannot pay to be on our global school rankings. It all comes from the quality of the students' work and that data that we collect on the actual rookie awards,
Yeah. And
which
how
is
many
being judged
schools and
by.
universities? Sorry, how many schools and universities do you have that are sort of attached to you?
So we had over 500 schools and training
Great.
facilities that
Mm.
that were participated in the Rookie Awards last year. So it's globally recognized. It's I think I don't think I'm wrong in saying that it is the biggest awards out there for creative industries involved in 3D.
Yeah.
We don't know any other one bigger than that. But yeah, it's very competitive now with schools encouraging their students, not only because they want to feature on the rankings, but because it gives their students a lot of exposure, and with exposure comes opportunity.
Mm.
And we talk to students. You can be the best artist sitting in that classroom, possibly competing against your classmates, but if no one else knows about your work, you're not going to get those opportunities, right? So you need to understand about networking, your own personal brand, how to build that, what are the channels and avenues where you can present your work to make sure that you're being seen by the right people, which is
Yeah.
where those opportunities come.
And you have quite a few different categories, don't you? There's architecture, architectural visualization, you have fashion, you have video games, animation. What else is there?
Yeah, so there's 10
Yeah, 10.
categories. So yeah, I was hoping you were going to reel them all off for me then. So we have visual effects, 3D animation, we have 2D animation, we have immersive, we have 3D product design, we have architectural visualization, we have motion graphics, we have digital fashion, and what else am I forgetting in there? Think and concept art and illustration and game
Mm,
design and development. That's the 10.
that's
So
that's pretty broad. That's great.
yeah, well, we're going to actually introduce a few more categories for this year
Mhm.
as well. Again, looking through the Adobe lens, we see all these new industries that are embracing 3D that obviously companies are going to need talent for. So, being able to be early and introducing these categories, we're hopefully, joining the dots with industry that are looking for, new recruits and being able to come through the rookie awards and have the skills that they're looking for. So
Mm,
yeah, digital fashion was one that we introduced a couple of years ago because there's a whole movement and shift going on within the fashion and retail space where they're adopting 3D pipelines and the sustainability issues and all these other great benefits of adopting 3D. That we're seeing a massive shift in that sort of industry. And there's other industries that are going through that digital transformation at the moment as well.
yeah, and since you have this sort of connection with the schools and universities, do you also have a connection with different industries? Or I guess is that where the platform comes in, where people can find the rookies? Do you reach out to industries at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's all about joining the dots. Um, Obviously, from your experience as being a judge, there is amazing talent that comes through the actual platform itself.
Mhm.
For a lot of companies, recruitment is super hard. It's a super hard job to try and find that emerging talent. So it is it's a great portal for discovering the next generation of amazing talent. So we do, obviously coming from industry, we have a really great network of people that are supporting. And I think, the key message is with the Rookies platform, it is so well supported by industry that, we have this beautiful ecosystem where people come through the Rookies. We've got 14 years of legacy. They've come through with given them their break. They've gone on to do, an internship or whatever. And now, these people are running studios or heads of departments and they want to give back. So it kind of goes in this full cycle of people wanting to give back. So a lot of studios will come to us and go, hey, like we'd love to be able to offer a career opportunity because we know that you have a great platform for being able to find talent. So, and with the new industries, well, like I said, we know that there's companies that are adopting these 3D pipelines that are looking for talent. So if you're able to, join those dots with the company and also what we're offering, then it's a no-brainer for a lot of studios and companies.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. I feel like now more and more as people are online more, there's the opportunities to share your work are there, but there's sometimes too many, and so it's great to have a platform where there's a lot of different industries in one place. And I guess there might be cross-pollination too, like someone might be interested in 3D animation, but also realize they want to do immersive design or something like that, and sort of see their peers and see the chats and the forums and get involved there. I feel like even just seeing people post, like you said, the dailies is a that's a discipline in itself as an artist, isn't it? Sort of, learning how to get the confidence to post your work, for example.
Absolutely. I
Um,
mean,
yeah.
even your background, right? So you were in games before you got into architectural visualization, right?
Yeah, yeah. I studied architecture, then I got into games. It was sort of by accident because I worked at Rockstar Games and I was living in Edinburgh. They were, the biggest company, and it was just a great place to work. And I learned pretty much everything there on the job. That was a very lucky foot in the door position of, like, being at the bottom and learning everything from my colleagues. But without being able to get that kind of foot in the door position, especially if you don't live somewhere where these big studios are, you have to do that online. And I think, I've talked a lot about how I'm fortunate enough to have gone on YouTube and just, I don't know how to do this thing, look it up, someone's put tutorial up. I mean, that in itself is an amazing platform, I guess, like for YouTube. But to have the communication with different other artists around the world, I think if you're somewhere remote, or if you're somewhere, a small town or something, and you can't work in one of those big studios, if you can't move around the world, how do you get to develop your skills? It has to be an online community, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And even from you moving from architectural into the game design development sort of space, what skills did you take across from there, or was it like a completely new beginning for you, or were there relatable skills even from that architectural visualization training into the games?
Yeah, so I went from architecture, but I always loved the art side of it. And then in video games, I got into the environment art. So I was basically making buildings, but it was like I was making buildings that didn't have to exist. So it was sort of like the funnest part for me. Um, and I always liked drawing and painting, so this was like a 3D version of that essentially. Then I went from that into architectural visualization. So then I went into making images, and I very quickly got into real time because I'd experienced moving around things in a video game environment. And I just thought, as we're visualizing things, and the whole point of visualization is to get people to understand the space, it just seemed really obvious. Why don't you do it in real time? At the same time, Unreal Engine, and I think it was like Unity at the time, were coming up and developing these tools. And so that sort of coincided, where I think a lot of ArcViz is related with video games now. And there's a lot of crossover also back into video games. I think a lot of video games are also using more architectural knowledge to make more realistic cities. So I feel like those two do cross-pollinate. I think you could probably, like, look at two different industries and think the same. I'm sure you could sort of make connections between, I don't know, films and fashion, of course, or I don't know. Like, I think there's so much
Yeah.
cross-pollination, which is like the exciting thing for creatives, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what I talk to a lot of students about this very topic actually, because I mean, you're absolutely right. In games, they actually look for architectural people because those skills absolutely translate across and to your experience. That's what happens. And sometimes they're the best artists for those, game environments, is because they have that sort of traditional. So they're bringing that experience. And even when you're looking at digital fashion, for example, now, people that have a traditional fashion background training that can understand a little bit of technology and then move into Marvelous Designer or Clo 3D or Browseware or Style 3D or any of these digital pattern fashion making software. These types of people are highly sought after because these are the ones that are driving digital transformation and big enterprise, and big fashion labels. Like, I'm talking the biggest in the world, right? They're looking for talent that understand this because they've got very established creative teams that are sometimes resistant to change. So that next generation, the one that could be a gaming student that has done Marvelous Designer, that just understands, how the tech works, they're a valuable commodity within some of these big organizations. And in fact, you can fly very, very quickly and sometimes be more lucrative careers than what games and visual effects offer. So if you're a student and you're struggling right now thinking, well, how do I get into games? And it's a really turbulent time in games and visual effects right now. And we're talking about this at the start, that I'm talking to a lot of studios, and even this year ahead there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's taking a while to really ramp up after all the strikes that have been going on.
Mm.
And even in your experience with architectural visualization in the commercial space, it's really flat, right? No one's going back into there's a real freeze on developments, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of uncertainties in a lot of different industries. But I think as a student, you need to take a step back and actually look at the skills that you're developing and be able to go, where else does this work? There are
Yeah.
industries that are flourishing. And actually, if you take a moment, there's opportunities everywhere. And I see that, so
Yeah.
it's not all doom and gloom. Sometimes you just need to step out of your bubble, realize what you've got, and just be adaptive and be able to be nimble, and sometimes you
Yeah.
need to go over here to get back over here. And even to your squiggly career path, that it sounds like you've gone from architecture to games, back into architecture visualization, and who knows where next. But you need to be open to change to be able to kind of get where you want to go.
Yeah, I think it's a great reminder. I think that's great advice for people starting out in the industry. It's also a great reminder for people with a lot of experience because, sometimes you can work in your own field and you don't see the other pathways and the other opportunities. And a platform like the Rookies is great because you can actually see um all the different things that people are doing, and I guess it's kind of great to open your eyes to the different ones. You always think that your skills are transferable, and then my experience has sometimes been that you find out that they're so specialized that it's hard to transfer, but actually finding a way to like change your skills so that you can prove, because like you said, sometimes you need just to be given the opportunity to do a thing to show them that you can do the thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You just got to back yourself. I think that that's, first and foremost, we're probably our own worst enemies in that sort of
Yeah.
imposter syndrome, and we're like, oh, not good enough. But actually, you just got to step out of that comfort zone and challenge yourself, and everything always turns out, but you got to keep moving forward.
Yeah. I want to ask you, before we finish, how do you think the AI tools are changing the digital art industries? Like, do you think there's going to be like an AI part of the competition? Would that be one of the categories, for example?
I don't think we're looking at introducing AI as a category at the moment. We're sort of, I guess we're United Nations on that sort of front at the moment. We're just kind of staying anonymous.
Sure.
We have things in place on the platform to identify whether artwork is being generated by AI. I think there needs to be a real honest, truthful, and transparent, I guess, point from somebody that is producing work using those tools. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not, I mean, obviously I work with Adobe, and we have Firefly, and I love how they've gone about their AI, I guess, structure and processes, and it's all ethically sourced images that have been paid by professional, Adobe have paid professional artists for that content. They're only sourcing that database of content that they've paid for, and so there's ways, but I think at the moment there's real copyright issues with
Yeah.
keeping up with what's going on. So whenever you see any of these sort of modern trends and new technology coming out, there's always copyright, and there's always processes that are always 10 years behind where the tech is, and that's
Yeah.
where companies can capitalize on that slow process and governance and stuff like that. So I think if companies are introducing it as Adobe have, then they're being ethically correct in the way that they're doing it. I think there's no problem with that. I think we need to embrace the technology. I use it all the time. I've found that it speeds up workflows and processes for me. If it can get me back on doing the creative and the beautiful stuff that I love doing faster without having to sit there and fudge Photoshop images and kit bash things and whatever it may be, and it helps me to get where I need to go faster to that, then I'm all for it. I think the concerning part, and if I go back to education again and how sort of slow they were in teaching new versions of software or new software that was coming onto the market and not having students ready for industry, that kind of concerns me a little bit about how they're introducing AI and how they're teaching it and what that looks like. Because as we know, software companies will be developing AI within their tools. So I think through natural versions and updates to the software, people are going to become familiar with the AI within the software itself. And there's going to be there's always going to be internal developments going on within software companies and also within studios. Studios are looking at this and going, how do we capitalize on this to save time, to save money, and all that sort of stuff. So, you just need to have your finger on the pulse, be up to date with what's going on, because even within that, there's going to be opportunity, right? So, as a student, you just need to keep updated, make sure that you're learning the tools and staying informed. I think that's super important.
Yeah, that's great. And is there any, I know we've just touched on this already, but any other advice that you'd give a digital artist starting out in the industry now?
Starting out right now, I think going back to community, I think community will be your strength. Networking is key, and networking can mean many different things. Networking can be not just only going to an event and meeting people. Networking is going to the rookies and connecting with people. Networking is connecting with people on LinkedIn. Networking is just going to local jams. The more that you can network, it's amazing how good things come out of meeting people. People want to give back, and if you're not trying to be part of that, then you're going to miss out on opportunity. So I think networking is huge, and if you're an introvert and you struggle with that, then you need to kind of overcome that and really learn how to step out of that bubble and start connecting. I think my advice is I've probably given a lot of advice through this webinar, but I think taking a step back, having a breath, looking at opportunities where they could possibly be, like we talked about, there is opportunities everywhere. Sometimes you need to go sideways to go forward. Don't be scared to go sideways. There will always be takeaways from even going sideways and opportunities that might present themselves even in that place. When I look at from my chefing career to where I am today, and if I look back and go, like, what was this journey all about? At each stage, there was a reason why I had to do that, whether it was being able to deal with pressure in a kitchen environment, or being able to multitask, or being able to organize team. There's skills that you take at every stage along the way that will then move you to that next point. So, I think get involved.
Yeah.
You got nothing to lose. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on. I think you've given some great advice and really good insight, and everyone listening should go and check out The Rookies. Check out the platform, check out the Rookie Awards that are every year, and I'll put in all of the links to the video here. So thank you so much for coming on and taking the time, Alwyn.
Thank you so much, and it was an honor to be on the webinar. I've watched a few of them, and you're doing a really great job, and I love all the people that you've interviewed so far. So
Great.
yeah, I'm going to help promote it, and then hopefully we get some traction with it as well.
Awesome. Great to hear that. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.